And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It's the best day of the week because it's the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show, this being episode number 124. I'm Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute, and we have a terrific show for you as usual today. There is no other show like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere, so I hope that you will like, share, and subscribe this video. Personally, tell people about it, because the more the merrier in our live chats, always lively, on YouTube and Rumble. And as a quick reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not like the way we cover climate and energy news and policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. That stands for the Climate Realism Show. And you can help us make sure that we keep this show happening every single week. Any support that you can give us, either monetarily or by sharing this podcast and letting other people know about it, is greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank our streaming partners that help us get this show in front of more eyes live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And those streaming partners are junkscience.com, CFACT, and What's Up With That. So thank you to those streaming partners. You can visit their websites, very easy to find, for even more great climate realism information like you get on this here program. So today we have a very special show, and we also have our usual panel of, I wouldn't say guests, but panelists. That's Dr. H. Sterling Burnett. He is the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. Anthony Watts, senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the most influential climate website in the world, What's Up With That? And of course, Linnea Lueken, research fellow for energy and environment policy at Heartland, and the star of our Climate at a Glance video series, which you can see on Heartland's YouTube channel and also on Rumble. We're almost through, 33 videos, I think. We're almost done posting them all. They are getting tens of thousands. It's probably more than 100,000 views total so far. So be sure to check those out. And we also have with us a returning special guest, Stanley Goldenberg. Now, Stan is one of the best hurricane experts in the country. He was kind enough to come on the show back in June to offer his predictions for the 2024 hurricane season. And well, Stan, we're glad you're back, and we're going to see how you did.
I'm glad to be here. Look forward to this.
All right. Yeah, it's always good to have you with us. You're also a frequent presenter at Heartland Institute's international conferences on climate change. We may have one in 2025. Stan was just asking about that backstage before we went live. So we may have some information on that in the coming weeks.
Everybody listening, you've got to attend if they have another one. They're awesome.
They are terrific. Oh, and actually, so before we get into it, speaking of something that you should attend, the Heartland Institute's having our 40th anniversary benefit dinner at the Hilton Chicago on September 13th. That's a Friday. And we have as our keynote speaker the one, the only Nigel Farage of Britain, probably the most staunch conservative and defender of freedom anywhere in Europe. And we're also going to honor Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College, with the Heartland Liberty Prize. It's going to be a fantastic evening. If you have not gotten your tickets yet, you can still get them. Just visit heartland.org. It's the first feature on our website, and you can get more information on that dinner. We really do hope to see you there. If you want to meet the people on this show, the people on the In the Tank podcast show, which we do on Thursdays, this is a great opportunity to meet us in person and also to support and celebrate the advancement of liberty in the United States and around the world. So We're going to get started as we usually do. You might notice on the left side of your screen, if you're watching us on YouTube or Rumble or X right now, we got to thank Donnie Kendall for giving us kind of a new look on our video here, so you can kind of get an idea of what we're going to be hitting as we move along. And we're going to do Anthony Watts's favorite segment, which is the crazy climate news of the week. Sometimes it's crazy, sometimes it's important, but it's definitely something you need to know.
Before we do that, Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you didn't give us enough credit on how good Linnea's videos are doing. You said you thought we had surpassed 100,000. I'm guessing hundreds of thousands. I mean, 2 videos. I think we had one this week that got 73,000 by itself or something like that. So I'm guessing we're multiple hundreds of thousands.
You are likely, it's around, Andy Singer, producer Andy Singer, thanks for producing the show again, as usual, Andy. He says it's around 400,000 views. So I didn't want to be, I wanted to be as accurate as possible, and I probably should have aimed higher. So congratulations, Linnea, and to Andy and to everybody at Heartland Students who make those videos work. I mean, because it's based on the Climate at a Glance book that we have sent to students and teachers and schools all across the country. The environmental left hates us for that. They attack us for that. But it's pretty much the only way that you can, deprogram and counter the brainwashing on climate that goes on in our public schools everywhere. And Anthony Watts and Sterling Burnett were the lead authors of that book. So congratulations to you guys. And having it in video form be so successful is a tribute to how good the book is. So you can find that at Amazon.com. Just put in Climate at a Glance at Amazon.com. You can pick up your copy. I believe it's just $10. So you can buy several copies and pass them around among family and friends. All right. That's a good interruption. Sterling, I will accept that. All right. So now our first item on the crazy climate news of the week is actually about how climate alarmism is causing a mental health crisis. So it's driving people crazy. This is from Just the News. Media narratives on climate change driving, quote, climate anxiety and harming young people. It says here, deaths from climate-related natural disasters are at historic lows. But a 2021 Lancet survey of people aged 16 to 25 years old found that 59% were very or extremely worried, and 84% were at least moderately worried about climate change. Medical professionals are, meanwhile, debating whether climate anxiety is a specific mental disorder. In the wake of widespread fears of climate change, an entire new field of psychotherapy has sprung up to treat what is being called climate anxiety. Climate-aware therapists, these people exist. They are specialists who treat people whose anxiety about climate change interferes with the enjoyment of their life. These specialists are now available in just about every major city across the United States. To the degree to which climate change will pose risk to people in the future is far from certain, as we point out often on this program. And the human race today is safer from climate than it was 100 years ago. The number of deaths from climate-related natural disasters has fallen 99% since 1920. And Linnea Lueken was quoted in this story at Just the News, noting that it is the media that are driving these overwhelming fears of climate change and ignoring evidence that would calm these anxieties. And she said, climate reporters' impact on children, as shown in the Lancet survey, raises a moral question. Quote, it's certainly abusive to be telling kids that they don't have a future, Lueken said. So, Linnea, we can start with you since you were quoted in the story. I guess the bad news is that people are being driven mad by climate alarmism, especially young people. But the good news, I suppose, is that we finally found a way that climate alarmism and the global climate agenda actually does create jobs, climate-aware therapists.
Yeah, well, I was going to say those climate-aware therapists. I'm wondering what kind of extra little grants they get, because we're always commenting at Climate Realism how, there's got to be some kind of an incentive, some kind of a financial incentive probably, or a publishing incentive to just include the phrase climate change in whatever paper you're writing, no matter what it's about. Just the other day, there was one that I covered for Climate Realism about people who were not evacuating during wildfires and who were suffering from smoke inhalation in Sonoma County when they were working picking grapes. And the paper and the AP article that covered it briefly mentions climate change in the abstract and in part of the introduction section, but it actually has nothing to do with climate change at all. It's just, they just threw it in there as kind of icing, probably to get the, I don't know, some kind of like bump to the top of the list for publishing or something. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I suspect that's going on. And the same thing is going on with the climate alarmism stuff that's honestly scaring the hell out of a lot of kids, especially. You've got groups like Covering Climate Now. Sorry, I'm losing my voice today. Covering Climate Now, which reinforces standards for news agencies on how they should be reporting on climate. That is, not giving any leeway whatsoever to facts that would tamp down on the alarmism, basically just ramping it up as much as they can. And of course, over the last couple of years especially, they've noticed the huge increase in people who say that they are terrified for the future. And people who say that they don't want to have kids because they're scared that there won't be, a livable planet for them, is the phrase that they're using now. And it is insane, but it's not necessarily the fault of the people who are entirely the fault of the people who are falling for it. But a large portion of the fault lays in the media that is, exaggerating weather events and is pushing the idea that we're, all going to die any day now from climate change. And the same can be said for, people like Klaus Schwab and ton of other world leaders. It's totally a media-driven phenomenon. It has nothing to do with people actually being increasingly hurt by weather disasters, because they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a form of child abuse. Let's be honest. I mean, brainwashing, especially impressionable children, into believing that, their very existence, that's really what the message is. Your very existence is putting the planet at peril and putting everybody else on Earth in peril. And it's obviously complete nonsense. I know Sterling and Anthony, you guys, follow the science on this that shows that, human activity is not causing a climate crisis at all, that the climate is not getting worse and worse and worse, that it's, these are all natural variations that humanity has survived. For crying out loud, we lived in the Ice Age.
Yep. This story, and the many times we've talked about it in the past, the psychological damage being done to these kids. The story talks about almost every city has basically a climate counselor or more. I'm sure there are multiple more than one. It reminds me of the movie The Field of Dreams, the baseball film, where the statement is, if you build it, they will come. Well, this is, if you scare people enough to create a psychological problem, the therapist will flock to it. And of course, then you create a constituency that helps continue to fight for climate alarm, because their paycheck is directly tied to kids being scared. When the kids stop showing up for climate therapy, they're back to scrambling. And, Linnea pointed out how they just sort of shoehorn these topics. I was on a panel once with a climate scientist who pointed out he was a climate skeptic. And he pointed out he still put climate change in almost every one of his grant proposals. And he used the example of one in Mexico. He wanted to study the decline of snow and glaciers in some of Mexico's peaks. And he suspected it had to do with farming practices, slash and burn farming practices, going higher up the mountain and dropping soot on the snow. But when he applied to the federal government and to ski organizations, he said, climate change may be melting the glaciers and reducing the snow on these peaks. We need to go there and study it, even though he already had data that showed the temperature on these peaks hadn't changed at all. So he got his funding, and it confirmed his pre-existing theory, is that they had used up the fields lower on the mountains, and they were moving higher up the mountains, slash and burn, causing soot, melting glaciers, had nothing to do with climate change.
Yeah. Now, Anthony, I know you want to jump in here.
Yeah, well,
Our Climate at a Glance website pretty much defines everything about this. I mean, if you look at all the different entries that we've put on there, you'll see that virtually every claim out there, sea ice, wildfires, whatever it might be, when you look at the hard data says there's no crisis. We're not making this stuff up. We're not making this a political statement, or anything like that. We deal in hard facts on Climate Realism, on this show, and also on the website, Climate at a Glance. Alarmists don't like hard facts. They want their scary stories. They want their emotional connections. And that's what they use to manipulate people. They simply don't want to look at it.
Yep. Very good idea. Stan, you got a quick thought you want to share?
Yeah, quick thought. When you talk about the scaring kids, I remember I had a high school student who was working in our lab under me, and he came over there, brilliant kid. I mean, much higher IQ probably than me, and brilliant kid. And he came over, he had been fed so much about the climate change stuff, he was terrified. I set him straight on the balance with that. He was also told that scientists don't use Apple computers. And he came into our lab and saw all these Apple computers. So they distort all sorts of stuff. But just like what I share later and share on this program, you can look at data a certain way and it looks like, just like the glacier thing, it looks like it's saying that. But if you carefully examine it unbiasedly, you end up with a very balanced view. So I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Keep that deprogramming going, Stan. We need more of it. All right. Item number 2 is from the Financial Times. And the claim here is that climate change is at least partly to blame for the sinking of a super yacht in the Mediterranean. Says here, one of the world's largest sailing super yachts sank in high winds off Sicily on Monday, causing the death of UK tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch and 5 other passengers and crew, with one person still missing on Thursday. I believe.
Pretty soon they're going to be rewriting Moby Dick, and that whole thing was about climate change. Idiot.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that one person still missing, unfortunately, I think was his 18-year-old daughter. Very, very tragic. But according to the Financial Times author here, the climate change is likely to have been at least a contributing factor in the Mediterranean's unsettled and sometimes violent weather this summer. The Mediterranean is a favorite cruising ground for super yachts during the Northern Hemisphere summer, as Anthony knows very well. He has a super yacht over there as well. In the winter, the wealthy prefer the Caribbean or the Indian Ocean because the weather is typically warm, sunny, and storms are rare. Meteorological experts have long predicted that climate change and the heating up of the oceans will help trigger more extreme weather events, including floods, droughts, and more severe hurricanes, which we're going to get to. Last Thursday, the Mediterranean reached a median temperature of 28.9 degrees Celsius, its highest surface temperature on record, and similar records are being broken in other seas. June, says this article, was the 15th consecutive month that global sea temperatures hit a record high, and forecasters predict the warmer waters may fuel an intense Atlantic hurricane season, which we're going to get to. But Anthony, I don't know. This looks like a freak storm that happened in the Mediterranean that happens from time to time. I mean, the yacht just happened to be in the exact wrong place at the exact wrong time, and apparently a water spout toppled it over and sank it in very quick order. So this is tragic. But does a warm Mediterranean actually create all of these new deadly water spouts now?
Yeah, well, no, you got it all wrong, Jim. See, climate change works like this. It reaches out and grabs things just, on microscopic levels, within like a square kilometer, and it just smacks them down. Oh, wait, that's weather, not climate. That's the absurdity of this. The left is taking any weather event that's somewhat different or odd, and then trying to turn it into climate change. They are making the logical fallacy of taking a 30-year period of climate, which is a statistical construct, not an actual thing in Earth's atmosphere. It's a statistical construct of measurements of temperature done over 30 years or rainfall done over 30 years, and then trying to turn that into driving weather events. Even the IPCC says there is no connection between storms and climate change. They have not found a signal in it, and they put this out in their most recent report. So their whole attempt at connecting weather and climate change is nothing more than bullpucky.
The thing about this story is interesting because I mean here it really is a microscopic scale because there was a sailing boat, there was a ship right next to the one that sank, and it was not affected, and it saved several of the people who were on the boat. They recovered people from the water during the terrific climate storm. So the water spout was really very localized. And another interesting fact is my suspicion is a lot of the blames on climate change is coming from insurance companies because, by the way, this ship, much like the Titanic, was touted as being unsinkable. I would never get on a ship that they told me was unsinkable. I think that is just foreboding. That is foreshadowing the sinking of that boat.
Yeah. All right.
I've got some pictures. I was trying to find them real quick here so I could send them, but I can't find them in my files right now. When I worked offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, there were a pretty good amount of the time you would see some water spouts out in the distance. There's one occasion that I am aware of when I was working out there, although not when I was on the rig, that the rig got hit by a water spout. And it is just like a tornado ripping through. I mean, they had most stuff already secured down because there was a bit of a storm on the way anyway. But it tore some stuff up. It broke some like part of the drilling assembly on one of the decks as it was laid out. And they had to recover some things that got thrown off the boat and stuff. It was a mess. It's like getting hit with a hurricane or with a tornado, but it's not, it's not something that's unusual. And I've seen them form out of what seemed like more or less clear skies too. So, I mean, these things pop all over the place. They're definitely not some new phenomena that's just come out of nowhere due to climate change.
Yeah, I mean, one of our viewers in the chat here said that he saw 2 waterspouts off Cornwall in the UK coast on a perfectly calm, sunny day over 20 years ago. So this is why we bring these stories up, because this conceit, this lie that the human emissions of carbon dioxide are causing not just overall climate change that's out of control and we're the drivers of it, but also more frequent freak weather events like this. It's like it's absolute nonsense, and you have to push back on it when you see it in the media.
I would say that Michael Mann is the biggest cause of nonsense emissions causing, severe weather that doesn't really connect to climate.
True. It certainly creates severe weather in my brain. It kind of goes a little nuts. All right.
Oh my goodness.
Our third item today is from the Daily Caller. And this is a bit of a specialty of Sterling. So you're going to be teed up to comment first here. Dr. Burnett, egregious federal overreach. Utah files major lawsuit that could diminish federal control of public lands. State of Utah filed a major lawsuit with the Supreme Court on Tuesday that could have major implications for federalism and the administration of public lands across the country if successful. Utah's lawsuit contends that the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, does not have the authority to effectively hold, quote, unappropriated state lands indefinitely under the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, the state announced. The federal government controls about 18.5 million acres of, quote unquote, unappropriated Utah land under the FLPMA. And Utah's suit argues that the state ought to control this land because nothing in the Constitution expressly permits the federal government to do so instead. In the context of federal lands, appropriated land is that which has been designated for specific purposes like military use or to serve as a national park, for example, according to the state of Utah. By comparison, unappropriated territory is essentially land that the federal government is controlling, quote, without formally reserving it for any designated purpose. Now, as I mentioned, Sterling, you've been following these kinds of federal land grabs out west for a long, long time. And this might be the most successful attempt, or we would hope it would be the most successful attempt to basically stop the federal government from just taking whatever land it wants for as long as it wants, and for not even really expressing a purpose. And that if we're going to show a chart here, I think we're going to bring it up on the slideshow there, Andy, showing just exactly how much land out west is not owned by people, but owned by the federal government.
Yeah. Well, I have long argued Utah doesn't go as far as I would. I've read the Constitution. I don't recall in there seeing anything about national parks, national forests. The forts are in there, military installations are in there, but so many of these things were creations of Theodore Roosevelt, basically, when he wanted to have a monument to environmental, his environmental views, conservation. So the land rights movement has been going on for a few decades. Back when I was writing my dissertation, I wrote about it. I forget what they used to call it. It wasn't called the land rights movement, but the people have been fighting in the West for years. This isn't really a climate story, of course, but it's important because, and it's especially important, Utah, it would be important for Utah to win this case. They'd get a lot of acreage that would fall under their control. They could dispose of, even though they say they won't. They'll keep it public, but under state control. I think that's a mistake. But if they win in Utah, it would set a precedent for other Westerns. I mean, look at Nevada. Almost no land is private in Nevada. Look at Alaska. It's a checkerboard because the red is just the federal government. The state governments also own a lot of land. So, and then there's beautiful, beautiful Texas. And it looks to me like Kansas, Nebraska, almost no federal land. Texas, because it was a republic. But if Utah wins this case, it would set a precedent other states could then use to apply to gain their lands back, like Idaho, Wyoming. And I think it's long overdue. There's nothing in the Constitution that grants the federal government the right to control land. In fact, it was supposed to dispose of this land to the people, to the states and the people therein. And of course, they used to have the Homestead Act to do precisely that. Unfortunately, the Homestead Act was set up in a way that unless you were farming, you couldn't keep the land. And so you could find other productive uses of your land, but then the government would come and take it back like they did in South Dakota with some caves. People set up hotels around these caves that they discovered on their land because they couldn't make a go of it farming, and they were selling tours. And the federal government came in and said, no, you're not farming. So we're taking this land back. And then they set up a national park in the cave. So it's an important case. I would not lay any odds that Utah will win, but I hope they do. And if they do, it'll set a real precedent. And, I think that could ripple through other policies, maybe even climate policy, because once again, I've read the Constitution and I've not seen anything in there about regulating people's energy use. If we can really get back to what the Constitution reserves to the states and the people therein, and specifically delegates to the federal government, will restrain a lot of this craziness.
Yeah, indeed. Any of you guys want to contribute to what Sterling had added to that?
I don't have too much to add other than that, because I think Sterling covered it pretty darn well. But that, growing up in Illinois, I had no idea that this was a debate or a problem. I was not aware of the American Lands Council. I was not aware of any of that until I went to school in Wyoming. And I attended a town hall where a representative from the Bureau of Land Management showed up. And I thought people were about ready to go find a strong tree. It was... it was a very aggressive meeting. Yeah, it was a very aggressive meeting, and that's when I met some candidates for the governorship in Wyoming who were campaigning pretty much exclusively on the idea of kicking the federal government out of the state. And my eyes were open to a whole new world of federal overreach.
The calendar says it all, right? Look at the Western United States. West of the Rockies, the federal government basically dictates people's lives. East of the Rockies, where the elite, except on the California coast there, notice the California coast, once again, not public. So where the elites live, the East Coast and the far West Coast, there's Seattle up there. It's not covered by feds. They don't have federal land. They've got private property, but they want their playgrounds. and they don't care if rural people have no control over their lives because the federal government dictates how they can live.
Yep. All right.
Yeah. This kind of also illustrates that, the way the United States evolved. We had lots of settlements in the East and the Midwest before the government got really big, and then when the West was settled, it was settled very sparsely in individual spots, and the government just took over the rest of the land because most of it, was sagebrush and that kind of stuff. And so now they're basically controlling all of it, especially when it comes to grazing, oil production, and that sort of thing. And like you say, Sterling, they're basically dictating people's lives west of the Rockies.
Yep. 100%. Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully the state of Utah is successful to maybe turn the tide on the federal land grabs that are going on, been going on for decades. So, all right. So let's share our meme of the week. And actually, Sterling, I know one of the things you wanted to talk about, that's not the image there, Andy. You want to take that down? It's in the slideshow that I have in there. There we go. So this is from Chris Martz, who was on the show last week. He says he has a PhD in BS detection while he is still just a student and entering his senior year studying meteorology at a college in Pennsylvania. But he points out here that in this tweet, temperatures across the eastern United States have been running well below average this week as a cool Canadian air mass dropped in. But the press is fixated on the heat wave in Texas because it's important to spread alarm by only focusing on the red and orange areas on the map. And so you see over Texas, Sterling, I got bad news for you. Over Texas, we have climate change. And over Chicago and here in the Midwest, we just have weather. So I guess we're living better than you guys. But.
Well, over Texas, we have summer. And because we have summer, I actually get to use my pool a few months of the year. I'm glad when I have to add water because it evaporates that it's hot enough that my pool stays warm and I can swim. I should point out, it was not just this week, but last week you would have seen that blue thing in the Midwest and the upper Midwest. There were a couple of days where there were more cold weather records set, record lows for the date, or record low highs for the date, than there were warm weather records set on those dates across the U.S., in the Midwest, and the East Coast. National Weather Service has gone through and point out there's dozens of cities and towns in the East and the Midwest who set both monthly lows, for the entire month. It wasn't just for the day. The entire month, they've never in history had a colder date or colder lower high. And this is ignored. No one, I haven't seen one story on it. ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, nobody is covering the fact that cold weather records are being set in the middle of summer. Instead, they're talking about summer in Texas.
I think my state right now, or at least my town, might have a cold weather record for the date this morning. I walked out there and I think it was like low 70s, high 60s, and it's usually well into the 80s, 90s in August here. So I might go look it up after this because it definitely is. We don't have climate change over here right now. We just have weather over here.
Well, I mean, it's records all across the Northeast. Fort Wayne, Indiana, nearly set a new record for cold for three running days. Reagan National Airport, grown a lot, very cold right now. Small airport in Tennessee, new record for cold date. And there you're not talking about, Linnea said, oh, it's cold here. It's in the 70s. No, when they say cold there, they're talking like some places are in the 30s and 40s in August. So this is unusual, but no one's talking about it because it doesn't play into the narrative.
Yeah. I mean, it's been an unusually actually kind of cool summer here as that image that Chris Martz shared shows. It's been very mild. I think we had basically one heat wave for like 5 days. maybe 2, and I missed one of them. I was out of the area, and it's going to warm up into the 80s and 90s, low 90s next week here in northern Illinois. And again, yeah, that's called summer. I'm actually looking forward to having a little bit more ejection of heat right before the end of summer, anyway, so that you can enjoy pools and things.
Yeah, right. In Texas, we didn't get our normal summer until late July and August.
Yep.
We didn't have any 100-degree days in June or July, in early July. I don't think we had them until late July or early August.
Yeah,
and that's not the norm. That's not the norm.
Yeah, people keep being told about the hottest summer ever, the hottest June, the hottest July, and they haven't experienced it. They just haven't, because it's BS. All right. Well, let's get on to our main topic for today, and why we have the great Stan Goldenberg on the program today. Stan, are you allowed to say who you work for before we get started? Obviously, you're not, because you're muted. So that's I can see that.
I am not. Okay, I'm unmuted. No, first of all, I work for NOAA. I work for the Hurricane Research Division of NOAA from the Atlantic Oceanographic and Atmosphere and Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory, Key Biscayne. But I'm here on my own time today, so I'm not necessarily representing NOAA, although almost everything I'm going to share today is from NOAA data and from my NOAA work. But I'm just specifically saying I'm here on my own time.
Okay, very good. Glad for that full disclosure, and for the and so if you've ever had a beef with NOAA about anything, now's the time to watch the show and jump into the chat. All right. Our first story. So we wanted to set this up because we had, as we mentioned earlier on the show, on June 2nd edition of this program, I think it was episode number 112. We had Stan on the program along with Joe Bastardi from Weather Bell, 2 of the most prominent, I think, public meteorologists in America right now. And Stan made his predictions, as did Joe Bastardi, on how the 2024 hurricane season would shape up. And they disagreed, and that's okay. But Stan's going to be on here all by himself. And so we thought it would be great, now that the hurricane season is kind of at its peak, but it's going to be winding down in a couple of months, to kind of see how these predictions, and Stan's were from NOAA, have gone. So we're first going to see how the media covered the upcoming 2024 hurricane season, because as you would expect, it was all alarmist news all the time. And we'll start with our friend Michael Mann. I hope you're watching, Mike. How you doing? Because we're going to be talking about you here for a little bit. This is from Penn Today, which is from the University of Pennsylvania. 2024 tropical cyclone prediction. Michael Mann and colleagues predict a record-breaking 33 named storms for the 2024 North Atlantic hurricane season. It is the highest count ever projected. Oh my goodness gracious. For more than a decade, climate scientist Michael Mann of School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Pennsylvania and his colleagues have annually combed through historical weather data, reviewed current oceanic and atmospheric conditions, and applied computational modeling to forecast the coming hurricane seasons. The team released their prediction for the 2024 North Atlantic season, which spans from June 1st to November 30th. They forecast an unprecedented 33 named tropical cyclones, potentially ranging between 27 storms and 39 storms. Quote, "We've seen many hyperactive seasons over the last decade, and in just about all cases, like our prediction for this year, the activity is substantially driven by ever warmer conditions in the tropical Atlantic tied to large-scale warming." Now, Anthony, we're going to stop here at this story because you were kind enough to share a graph that we could put up on the scrong to show that Michael Mann is wrong about the Atlantic.
Yeah.
I
was actually thinking the McLaughlin group kind of wrong, Wrong! Yeah, look at this. The temperature's actually starting to go down, and this is not surprising. We've had the Hunga Tonga volcano that erupted. It ejected a huge amount of water into the atmosphere. And as we all know, water vapor is the strongest greenhouse gas. And what happened after the eruption? Temperatures spiked. And climate scientists go, well, gosh, I don't know what's happening. They didn't want to allude to the fact that it was water vapor. Instead, they just throw up their hands and say, well, we don't know what's happening. But we do know that the hurricane season is going to be just awful. And because it's warmer, well, gosh, it hasn't happened. And so you can see here, 2024 is actually cooler than 2023. Gosh, how inconvenient.
Yes.
How dare you?
and the stories, I've seen a number of stories this week that says scientists can't explain why the Atlantic is cooling faster than it ever has in history. Well, how is that going to affect hurricanes? If the Atlantic is cooling faster than it ever has in history, and they can't explain it.
Well, yes, they can. It's our fault. It's because we drive SUVs.
Yeah,
so everybody knows that.
Exactly.
All right. Oh, Stan, you wanted to say something real quick about Michael Mann before we get into putting your previous predictions up on the screen and having to
ready on the mute button there real quick.
Okay, you ready? With all due respect to Professor Michael Mann at Penn State, as a professor and as a meteorologist, the outlook that he put out, which you sent me the link for that, is, in my opinion, quite exaggerated. It's not the highest ever predicted. It's the highest that we would have ever had. We've never had that many. His range, I believe, was from like 27 to 39. He's just showing you the middle of 33. We've never even had that many for any year, even the crazy 2020 year where we had 30 storms. So, and by the way, that term hyperactive is from my 2001 paper. So, Michael Mann, I hope you give due reference with that. I'm the one who came up with that term for a certain level of activity. So yeah, I hold no credence for his. Forget the man-made climate change aspect of it. It's just ridiculously high. Could it happen? Yeah, but no, but none of us expect that. And by the way, our outlook, like you said, is from NOAA. It's a team of people, not just me, just one of the team.
Understood. Okay, now so let's get into that here. So Andy can put up on the screen. This is this is from the NOAA website on May 23rd, 2024. The headline is NOAA predicts above normal 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. NOAA National Weather Service forecasters at the Climate Prediction Center predict above normal hurricane activity in the Atlantic Basin this year. The outlook predicts an 85% chance of an above normal season, a 10% chance of a near normal season, and a 5% chance of a below normal season. NOAA is forecasting a range of 17 to 25 named storms, and of those, 8 to 13 are forecast to become hurricanes, including 4 to 7 major hurricanes, and forecasters have a 70% confidence in these ranges. So we're going to see. It hasn't been that active yet, but Stan's going to explain what's actually going on here. And then we have another, I thought I'd keep looking at the NOAA website, Stan. And here's a post from August 8th, 2024. Quote, highly active hurricane season likely to continue in the Atlantic. Atmospheric and ocean conditions have set the stage for an extremely active hurricane season that could rank among the busiest on record, says NOAA in this post. With the peak of hurricane season quickly approaching, NOAA's National Weather Service urges everyone to know their risk, prepare for threats like damaging winds, storm surge, and inland flooding from heavy rainfall, and to have a plan to evacuate, which is always good advice. But this was just from a few weeks ago. This was on August 8th. I want to show real quick before we get to you, Stan, a couple of slides, Andy, from the slideshow there. One of them is Anthony was kind enough to share this image with us this week. And this is the actual number of Atlantic hurricanes by NOAA in their May prediction from the years 2001 to 2023. And in the blue shaded area there, if you're watching on our live stream, that was the range of predicted hurricanes by NOAA. And then the really cute hurricane symbol is the actual number of hurricanes that occurred in the Atlantic in that season. So, Anthony, what do you think of that chart and that prediction record?
Well, the article that this came from medium.com was well written, and they did a very simple statistical analysis of it. And the bottom line is that when you look at these numbers over the past 23 years, NOAA's rate of accuracy is about 52%, basically the same as a coin toss. So what are we actually doing with these predictions? Are we actually doing anything useful for the public when we predict these things? I'm not sure. Stan, what do you think?
Okay, well, I got a lot to say on this, but first of all, if you look at that particular chart and you start at about looking close, about 2012, 2013, you can see that the accuracy
starts at 2000.
Right, but I'm looking at the middle of it. If you go for the last,
okay,
the accuracy has increased. Plus, these are the May outlooks. There's definitely less skill when we predicted in May. And I'll show you why in my slides, why we update this in August. And so it really has been getting better. We have a few misses, but in general, you can see those hurricane symbols are falling in that shaded area, starting in that last section of the outlook.
It's definitely a better batting average starting at around 2013, no doubt about it.
And that's when we started incorporating a lot of different models, other different input into our seasonal outlooks. We're always getting better.
Okay. Well, Andy, I want to go to the next slide. This shows, so, we talked about what the predictions were. And so far, this is from the NOAA website, Stan, the 2024 Atlantic Tropical Cyclone names. So these are named storms.
It's not updated, by the way. It's not updated.
It's not. Okay. So wait. Okay. So on August 8th, that's fine. On August 8th, Alberto, Beryl, Chris, and Debbie were the named storms. I guess Ernesto has happened, but on August 8th, there was only, so now we have 5 named storms. And I think 1 major hurricane. So we looks to a layman that we are going to not make the prediction window of NOAA, and certainly not of Michael Mann. That goes without any goes without saying. So Stan, we wanted to have you on to explain to our viewers and to normal people, normies who are not trained meteorologists or certainly hurricane experts like you.
Oh, wait, we have normal people on this call? Okay, we got it.
We do have a few normal people on this call. It certainly doesn't include you. So, to explain, because they see it's not your fault. You don't write the headlines. NOAA doesn't write the headlines that cause panic among people thinking that this is going to be the worst hurricane season ever. It seems that we get those kind of headlines every hurricane season, and it seems to almost never come true. So this is a year where that happened, and you have a presentation to kind of talk us through how these predictions are made, why they were made the way they were, and whether or not we are likely to hit that NOAA window that you guys predicted in May.
Well, listen, I really like to educate people because hurricanes, it's not just the science, it's not just climate, it's not just this. They're real. I was in Hurricane Andrew, Cat 5 Hurricane Andrew, back in 1992, where my whole house was destroyed, and had a baby the night before. Half of Miami was devastated. These are very real, even just one hurricane hitting an area. So let me go into the slides. Can I do that? Sorry about that. Okay. And can you do full screen or bigger for a little while? They don't need to see my pretty face. There we go. Okay. And let me go through these quickly. I'll give a background, but I'll go as fast as I can. This is a very important chart because this shows the overall climatology for hurricanes in the Atlantic. And you can see that May, June, July, hiccups of activity. August, September, October, the peak months of the hurricane season, with around September 10th being the peak. So you can have very little before that point and still have a very, very busy year. We've had years with almost nothing till August 20th. And yet it still was an above average year and sometimes even hyperactive year. So if you go to the next slide, you're going to hear this phrase tossed around so many times. It comes from my 1996 paper, Goldenberg and Shapiro, and that's the main development region. And the reason that was named that is that all those yellow dots, and this is for a period, 1968, 1992, all those yellow dots are where the systems that eventually became major hurricanes, and those are their tracks, started to form. So most of them form in this main development region. And so we look at the climate factors in that region to dictate what the season is going to be like. So let's go to the next slide. And this is the current climate conditions. Now, this is not from when we made the outlook. This is back in the beginning of August. This is right now. And the slide on the left shows the vertical shear. You can have the oceans boiling away, and the vertical shear, which is the difference between the lower and upper level winds. If that difference is really strong, it rips the storms apart. So the red area is below average. That means it's low vertical shear across most of the main development region. That means that area is ripe, that if you get a good seed storm come in there, that it's going to be able to develop. The slide on the right is this is not the actual vertical shear. This is not the actual sea surface temperatures. These are the anomalies, how they're different from normal. So you sit there and have very warm, above average. I'm not going to say whether they're record or not. That's irrelevant to me. They're above average in the main development region. You can see that blue area in the Pacific. That's the beginnings of the La Nina. It's kind of neutral right now, but they expect it to go into a full La Nina. When you have a La Nina in the Pacific, that tends to enhance hurricane activity in the Atlantic. So you still have all these things in place for above normal activity. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this kind of wraps it. I won't spend a lot of time with this one, but it just shows you got above average sea surface temp, below average shear, you got weaker, you got all these different things, and they all favor an active hurricane season. You got to realize that when we update the outlook in August, that's because most of the activity has not happened. It's just like you get in a baseball game and you're at the bottom of the first, and now you know the batting lineup. Now you know the condition of all the players, and you make that outlook. So right now we're saying that when the key part of the season kicks in, we expect a lot to develop. Next slide. Another key indicator, these are complicated slides. I'm sorry I didn't simplify them way down for this, but I'll just give you the gist of it, is that little dotted red box, which is part of the main development region. You see all those yellow dots there? Those are the tropical storms and hurricanes that formed in June, July. Now you can see they form, in the Gulf and off the East Coast. But when we have had a storm form in that box, and again, this is a lot of this from my research. I'm not the only researcher, but a lot of them are from my research. And I'm certainly not the most famous hurricane person in the country, but just the Heartland. But anyway, whenever we have one in that box, almost every single one of those years is an above average year. And this year, we didn't have just a storm. We had a Cat 5 hurricane form in that box late June into July. And we saw that. We said, when the key part of the season kicks in, it shows this area is very, very ripe. This is important. Next slide. Sorry, next slide. Okay, so this is the basically our outlook. You showed the one in May. So in August, we made below average to zero. We said 90% chance it would be above average, and you can see the number of storms and hurricanes and major hurricanes on the right. And the issue is, and go to the next slide, I believe, this kind of shows the ACE. ACE is a measure of overall activity for the season back to 1950. So you have a high activity era, low activity era, and high activity era. By the way, so many papers, you talk about distorted papers, will start their study on hurricane activity in the low activity era, draw a trend line into the high activity era, and say, look how storms are increasing. They ignore the previous high activity era, where it's a cycle, not a trend upward. But you can see in the pink on the right, that is our outlook in ACE, 165 to 245% of mean. 165 is the cutoff for hyperactive, means the whole range we have centered above into the hyperactive area. And we're not expecting unprecedented, like busier than any other year, but we're expecting a busy year. Next slide. This is where we are so far. So far, we have had 5 named storms, 3 hurricanes, 1 major hurricane. The ACE is already up to 55. That means the ACE is already about half of normal. And it's a third of hyperactive already. And if you look, and I know it's hard to see, this is not, and you look at that figure on the bottom, the part on the bottom, this is not a dead August. We've had 2 hurricanes in August, one a Cat 1 and one a Cat 2. And if you look at those numbers, I don't know if anybody can read those, but every single parameter is well above average for this particular date. I just pulled that off today, with the exception of the number of storms. So we're about average on having 5 storms by now. But the number of storm days, the number of hurricanes, the hurricane days, everything is above average. So, the fact that we're having a slow period at the end of August does not give us a signal that, oh, we really blew it, maybe something will happen later. We're expecting, and people who are in hurricane-prone areas absolutely need to stay prepared, get prepared, and stay prepared. And now, as far as Michael Mann's, it's like, I haven't seen his research and his science, but none of us would ever predict that many named storms at this point. So that's really all the slides I have to show, and we can just at this point.
Well, hold on, just 1 second, Sterling. I want to set up Anthony for something here. And so I found this satellite image of the Atlantic Ocean this morning, about 2 hours ago. to use on today's program. Anthony Watts, you're a trained meteorologist. You look at that satellite image.
Can you bring that full screen so I can get a better picture?
Yep, go full screen on that, Andy, please. Tell us what you see, Anthony.
Okay. Well, first of all, I see a lot of dust coming off of Africa. And that dust is basically a real killer for storm formation. But, I see what could be a tropical depression forming off the southeast coast of Florida. It's an area of thunderstorms that's building up, but right now it doesn't look like that's likely. There's no probability coming in from NHC for that to, start exploding. So basically what I see here is a fairly calm Atlantic hurricane basin with no new significant formation likelihoods and a lot of dust. Also, it seems like there's a fair amount of wind shear coming in from the north to the south. So it just does not look favorable for hurricane formation right now.
Yeah,
let me jump in. I would agree with Anthony on that. And that's the issue. It's very quiet right now. If you bring up hurricanes.plural.gov, the Hurricane Center site, you see that they're not looking at anything for development right now at this time. And he was right, that dust, which tends to start lessening towards the end of August and into the beginning of September, is a tremendous suppression for activity. So right now, we're not surprised. It's quiet right now. We've had this. I have to tell you, we made our very first NOAA seasonal outlook in 1998. I was on that team. It was the beginning of August. It was a La Nina, favorable for hurricane activity. We're in an active era, favorable for hurricane activity, which is a no-brainer. We're going to call it's going to be above average. And as soon as we made that outlook, the Atlantic went just like this, deader than dead. And people were saying, I'm telling you, for weeks.
Not just mostly dead, truly dead, right?
It's truly dead, truly, yeah, just like Wizard of Oz. She's absolutely, totally dead. And we were sitting there, and people were emailing on our big tropical storms list saying, hey, have we ever had a year that's been above average that doesn't have anything, until 20th of August, this and this? So I started looking back over the previous years. And I found so many years with hardly any activity till late August that were above average that I stopped looking. So this is not unusual. And forget the hype, forget everything else. And plus, people have to keep in mind, I don't care how busy it is, it only takes one storm to affect your area and cause death, doom, and destruction. 1992, where we got clobbered by Andrew, that was one of the slowest years in recent times. And yet we got Andrew. But we do expect a lot of activity. And I will make a prediction. Now, Anthony, write this down, 100% certainty on this prediction. Forget the 70%, 95%, 100%. You're all ready for this. You're going to come back and tell me I'm right. If we have a devastating, damaging hurricane during this season, during the rest of the season, someone, not just someone, lots of people will blame it on man-made climate change. 100% accurate prediction.
Yeah, that person will not be you.
A brave prediction.
I have to say, yeah, that's a real
we could probably start writing rebuttal articles now because we know what they're going to say.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Without question. And listen, people are talking about the record SSTs in the Atlantic. They were record from the observed record. Always remember that our data constantly gets better, and it's hard to compare something now with 100 years ago, apples for apples. But it was record then, and then it goes down. So it's not quite as record. It's record in, I believe it's Caribbean temperatures in the main development region are near record. And the MDR, they're near, they're high, but it's the vertical shear that makes all the difference in the world.
Right.
And that is looking low. So I don't look forward. I saw that comment. I don't look forward to a busy hurricane season. Gee, I live in Miami. I'd rather fly out there and study them out there than study them from my house. So I hope we're wrong. I hope it's not a busy season, but it sadly really still looks like that.
Well, and I have two questions. Well, one a comment and one a question, I guess. The comment is, so let's say that it does pick up because we haven't hit peak hurricane season yet. So let's say that it does pick up, whether it gets to normal, above normal, whatever. if most of those hurricanes never make landfall, do we really, how much do we really care? The news reports, they report on Ernesto. Well, it hit Bermuda, and in Bermuda, disaster. But it didn't hit the East Coast. It didn't hit Florida. It didn't hit Texas. As soon as Ernesto passed, the media stopped covering it. They don't care about Bermuda. It's only when it strikes the U.S. that they really go crazy. So I'm wondering what's going to happen if it's a very busy season, but most of the hurricanes don't make landfall. That would be an interesting case. The second question I have is, how is your not your personally, but NOAA's prediction affected by, here's the new scientist headline, but dozens of headlines. Part of the Atlantic is cooling at record speed and nobody knows how. Why? I've seen this in dozens of stories. How will that affect hurricanes?
That has nothing to do with our hurricane activity right now. The main development region is still plenty warm. The vertical shear is low. Record speeds does not mean it's going to go below normal for this time of year. By the way, commenting on your other thing, normally during a hyperactive year, there's at least 2 or 3 landfalls. And we've already had one in the U.S. We've already had 2 in the U.S. so far. So I would expect some more landfalls, sadly. Depends exactly where they hit. By the way, someone did a comment from Houston. And I got to mention this. This is a general thing. This isn't a climate statement, but this is just a day-by-day forecast statement, is that I have a good friend in Houston, Dr. Neil Frank, used to be director of the Hurricane Center. So we chat a lot. And by the way, he spoke at one of the Heartland conferences. He's really solid with this stuff. And he said people were telling him, they didn't warn us. They didn't warn us. I went back and looked at the forecast for like almost a week, and they had the cone on top of them or near them for days before it hit. But people don't pay attention to the cone. They just think the skinny line is the only forecast. Plus, a hurricane's a very large thing. So, yeah, I sadly believe that we're going to have some more landfalls. And of course, there's the Caribbean as well that gets clobbered, from some of these things also. So it just takes one, and we just hope that people are ready and it doesn't impact as bad as it could.
Right. Well, it does just take one, but if it's gonna get to the middle of the NOAA range, the Atlantic Ocean better get a move on, because right now it's pretty
I like
calm.
Give it time. We're only in the bottom of the first inning.
Oh no, it used to be the 4th inning at least. All right.
No. I'm very serious. Go back to slide 1. Put that slide 1 back up there. Get that in people's heads that most of the activity happens later in the season.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. But I again, as a layman, we talk about these topics a lot, but I think that's a fantastic explanation, Stan. Thanks for being on the show. I think our viewers and listeners got a lot out of it, and that's terrific. So we have lots of questions actually in the chat from our viewers, and so we will hand it over to Linnea to go through them for us.
I'm going to begin by prioritizing questions that are directly to Stan. So, and very specific hurricane questions. And there's one that popped up here a bit ago that I thought was a great question. And that is from Chris Nesbet, who says, is there an equivalent hurricane genesis zone for the Southern Hemisphere? And if so, do we see a link with the Northern Hemisphere zone?
Okay, well, first of all, it is very rare ever to have in the Southern Atlantic. However, in the Southern Pacific, Indian Ocean, things like that, there are areas. I just haven't done research in those areas. There was a lot that went into that main development region, but there's certainly preferred areas of development. So that's all I can say for that.
Awesome.
Next.
Thank you. Okay, next. This is from our longtime viewer, Albert. He says, question for Stan, the gold standard. What do you think the remainder of the hurricane season will look like from now through September?
Well, I think that's what I've been talking about, is at some point you will see it switch, and we'll start to see these waves come across, and there'll be a certain number that'll develop. And, the sad thing is Hurricane Andrew developed August 17th. And as late as Friday, Andrew weakens and is moving out to sea and had upper level unfavorable. And all of a sudden, everything changed. It went from a tropical storm to Cat 5 in 36 hours and hit us not too many hours later. So sometimes we see these things track long and sometimes develop, pretty close by. And a lot of the Eon that we talked about 2 years ago, right? That hit the Fort Myers area was a tropical storm not too long before it revved up and became Cat 5. So people have to just be ready for these things. We expect, if we get to the end of September and haven't had some decent amount of activity, bring me back on. I will be very surprised.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, hopefully it does not come to my house, though. We need to get someone who's famously bad at predicting hurricanes to say that it's going to hit my house.
Where's your house?
I'm in coastal South Carolina.
Oh, no, that's not a good area.
Yeah, no, it's not. I already got the after effects of one.
And we're really looking forward to you, Linnea, doing a live report on this show sometime in the future, where you're holding onto a stop sign like Dan Rather,
Yeah, I'll go find
what city?
Water pool to stand in to make it look like the flooding is bad.
What city were they?
Huh?
What city?
Between Hilton Head and Charleston.
Oh my.
Yeah.
You probably weren't there during Hugo. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
She lives in none of your business, North Carolina.
Yeah. I'm not gonna give an exact one, but it is. Yeah, it's a highly active area normally. Okay, so here's a question from Chris. He says, Stanley, any idea regarding the estimation of energy in a water spout?
I've got my answer. A lot. But nothing quite like a tornado. That's not my area. I couldn't tell you. But let me tell you this, how much energy is in a hurricane. In an average hurricane, the amount of latent heat energy released, Anthony would understand this language, in one day could power the electrical needs of the entire United States. Anybody want to make a guess for how long?
I'm thinking it's about 5 years.
6 months. 6 months. That's long enough. Though. 6 months.
All right.
I mean, I forgot the exact stats. It's like, 420 megaton bombs. I mean, the amount of energy in a hurricane is because a tornado or a water spout is even smaller, but tornado is tiny compared to a hurricane. Hurricane Andrew was like a, 30-mile wide F3 tornado. That's about the equivalent of what it did.
Yeah. So in terms of strength, the weakest is the dust devil. And then we have the water spout and then the tornado. I've been through both dust devils and water spouts. I've flown through a water spout on a small plane. It's not destructive. I mean, you can fly a Cessna right through a water spout in most cases. Yeah, you get bumped around a little bit, but it's not, catastrophic. Don't try to fly a plane through a tornado, though. That would not be good.
Which brings up the movie Twisters, which I watched the other day. My wife loved it. She almost broke my hand during one of the scenes, squeezing my hand. I was in torment watching the movie. I was like, she couldn't understand. She loved, this is a great movie. I said, no meteorologist does the stupid things that they do to put themselves in harm's way like that. Park a car in the middle, fine, park it there, and then get out of there. That drove me bananas watching that movie, but it's a well-done movie, cute special effects.
Little known facts. Stan was the technical advisor on Sharknado 1 and 2.
That is a joke. For those who don't know, that is a joke. Okay.
I would say this.
Those at work. Wait, Jim, we have days where we watch some of these silly movies, and we have watched the Sharknado movies at work.
I would say this. Evidently, you can fly a Cessna through a water spout, but you can't park an unsinkable ship in a water spout. I guess that was proven this past week.
And it definitely hurts when the rig gets hit by it. Doesn't feel good.
By the way, the reason the water spouts don't have quite as much oomph is because they've got water in them. So it takes a lot of their energy to lift up that water. And we've had someone who was swimming out near where we work, and all of a sudden the sky got really dark, and the people further away were saying, you got a water spout coming at you. So they're very, very different. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a good question for Anthony or whoever. Do water spouts have a rating associated with them?
No. They're not even an EF0 in terms of strength. So There is no rating system for them, mainly because water spouts are not destructive in any way for the most part. Yeah, occasionally, might throw some beach chairs around or
They
some,
can flip a boat over.
cabanas or something like that, but they're not really destructive.
Yeah, they're not going to like drag you up into the air or anything. Okay, so we have this
no
question,
cows
which
go up
is,
in water spouts.
this question comes from X, and this is from Charles, and he asks, is there a connection to the sunspot cycle regarding hurricanes?
No.
That was easy. Okay.
That's all I'm going to say. No.
All right. Here's an interesting one from Kite Man Music. He asks, what sort of weather could you predict that would disprove climate change? Like, is there a weather condition that would prove that climate change, or I guess I'm going to specify it to global warming, was not happening?
Boring and normal.
Yeah.
There'd be nothing to talk about, nothing to blame on climate change.
But weather is never boring and normal. Weather is always extremes of every year in different regions. That's the trouble.
There's the old quote, climate is what you expect, weather is what you get. And the issue is let me be, as a very, very researchy scientist, okay? You can't just wave your hands and say this is ridiculous. People like Anthony, people like myself in other ways, you have to look at the data. You have to look at it carefully. You look at it over a long period of time, and that way, and the more you look at it, the more you realize this is hype, that it's not like they say it is if you look at the data carefully. I'm going to mention something in our lab. I'm going to say this. I could get in trouble. But in our lab, there was a presentation recently, and it had a slide, just like I said, where they started in the low activity area, went to the heavy active era, and drew a trend line. And I was horrified. And I still want to sit down with the person and talk about it, because they say, yeah, look how they're getting worse. It's like you forgot the cycle before. So anyway, go ahead. Oh, I like this one.
Yeah, I'm going to have to read this out loud for our audio only listeners. Stan, when your wife squeezed your hand afterwards, did you go to the secondhand store?
Oh, that's so cute. That's listen, it was a scene in the movie with the movie theater. Everybody in the movie theater. And she was squeezing it really, really hard. She's probably watching right now. We got to laugh.
Okay, so we're gonna, I think that's most of the hurricane specific. Oh, here's another one. Never mind. Okay, here we go. Question: has the relatively rapid transition from the warm ENSO conditions to cooler ENSO offset Atlantic hurricane threats? Has high altitude wind shear increased in the Atlantic area yet?
Okay, keep that on the screen.
Yeah,
so
I will.
See the details with it. First of all, it's not a rapid transition. I don't call it a rapid transition. These things flit, or let's just say it's not more rapid than normal. I've seen faster transitions, and it doesn't offset the hurricane threat. It's the opposite. I mean, when you go to cool, when you go to La Nina conditions, the physics of it is that the hotter it is in the Pacific, okay, in the Central Pacific, it generates more thunderstorm activity and convection. That makes rising motions that then hit the troposphere, go east, and increase what we call the westerlies over the land, which increases vertical shear. That's in a nutshell. So the cooler it is, the less you have that. And as far as the wind shear increase, it has definitely not increased. It's very, very conducive, meaning very below normal in the Atlantic for the vertical shear.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. Let's see. Let's go for this one. This is from Bogus, a frequent viewer of ours. And he says, a few years ago, I debated an old teacher of mine who was on about more storms. I pointed out that we just had the longest drought in major storms ever. He said, the fact that it's a record should tell you something. How do you deal with people who are that indoctrinated? And I'm going to pitch this, I think, to Anthony first, and then we'll get everybody else in on it.
It's like talking to a piece of wood sometimes. Folks just don't want to assimilate new information, no matter how practical or factual it is. And I've dealt with this a lot. There's there are people that live in fear of climate change because they have been told climate change is bad, climate change is going to destroy the future of your children, so forth and so on, by people that spin lies. It's just that simple. It's essentially almost child abuse when they do that sort of thing. But the thing is that when it gets to that level, it becomes almost religious-like. You can't argue against it like you can't argue against a religion because it's based on faith. And so people have faith that climate change is going to destroy the world in the future. And you can't argue factually a way out of that with them because they didn't get into it factually. They got into it through an emotional connection or a faith connection. And that's the biggest problem that we face as climate skeptics, trying to get through to people with simple factual references to demonstrate to them that climate change is not the killer and the end all of the earth in the future.
Listen, let me make a comment on that. The first time I heard a particular quote was at one of the Heartland conferences. And that quote is, "It's far easier to deceive somebody than to convince them they've been deceived." And people are hearing this stuff night and day from every which way. We can convince them, but it takes some really, really focused sharing with them. And I've seen people's eyes pop open, but it's not easy. It's not easy once they've been deceived with this.
I would say in response, he didn't specify what kind of professor it was. If it was a professor in the field of science, I would ask him what he thinks about the scientific method and how that applies to data and evidence, and how the climate narrative fits in with the below record, and see if he sort of starts thinking, hold it, maybe the scientific method mitigates against this. But if not, the way you deal with them is you have them removed from teaching at the university, because I don't need doctrinaires there. I need scientists that are open to evidence and data.
Thank you. I don't think I have anything that I can add more than everybody else already said. It's just, there's something like extreme, like a willful ignorance for some people. Sometimes it takes something emotional to drag them out of it, if emotion is what talked them into it. Okay, this is a question that I have seen a lot, and we don't always get to cover this, but I know that Stan has the answer to this, so I'm going to let him answer it, because it refers back to a comment that he made earlier about hurricane energy levels. And that is a question from one of our Rumble viewers, LT Oracle of Truth, who says, do you think that NEXRAD radar stations can steer hurricanes? And I'm going to add that to any weather modification stuff regarding hurricanes, just in general. Is that something that we can do?
Yes. Next, we're going to be talking about directed energy weapons.
No, let's.
I will try to be polite and not laugh, but I understand them thinking certain things can. Remember when I shared how massive the amount of energy in a hurricane was? We actually have a section, if you look up hurricane FAQ, frequently asked questions, from the Hurricane Research Division. We have a whole section on hurricane modification that I helped write. And the issue is it's so massive. No, a NEXRAD radar can't do anything. We only wish. And we've done all sorts of experiments. They're so mad. But the NEXRAD can help detect them better and analyze them better and protect the public. I have a saying, hurricanes happen. So hope for the best, prepare for the worst. You're not going to be able to stop them. You're not going to be, even if there's more, if there's less, they're still out there, and you got to take them seriously, as anybody who's gone through them can tell you.
Yeah, I want to point out that the amount of energy that a NEXRAD radar emits into the atmosphere is equivalent approximately to someone standing on the coast and shining a flashlight out to sea on a hurricane. It's not that much. We get very, very small reflections of energy from the water droplets in a hurricane or in clouds or whatever. It's not a huge amount of energy. Even though a radar might have a rating in the megawatts, it's a very short pulse. It pulses very quickly. And so the effective radiated energy is much lower when you average it over time. So hurricanes cannot be steered by next radar. Not no way, not no how.
Listen, people have suggested dropping atomic bombs. It's like the hurricane would kind of yawn. And what is that? All you do is spread radioactive dust everywhere, but it just would do nothing to a hurricane.
Wow, you're saying that humans do not have a very good direct effect on the weather. I'm starting to think that may have wider implications for these discussions, but let's not go there because this is the end of the program for today. And I want to thank our usual panelists. I want to thank Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute, Sterling Burnett, the Director of the Robinson Center on Energy and Climate here at the Heartland Institute, and of course, Linnea Lueken, a Research Fellow and the star of our Climate at a Glance video series, and of course, our friend Stan Goldenberg, hurricane meteorologist, who has a little bit of a claim to fame that we might want to mention real quick before you.
Just if anybody wants to see my hurricane story, I think it's streaming on the bottom. This was a National Geographic special, and if you watch the whole special, it's got water spouts on there too. But it's bit.ly/Goldenberg. Andrew's story. My story starts about 10 minutes in, and you'll see how my house was quite destroyed from Hurricane Andrew, with me in it.
Oh, good. Well, thank goodness you're okay. So I want to thank again our streaming partners, junkscience.com, What's Up With That, and CFACT, which also runs the Climate Depot website. Those are all places you should be checking out. Go to climaterealism.com, go to climateataglance.com, go to energyataglance.com, and also always go to heartland.org. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening, and we will talk to you next Friday. Bye-bye.
Come on, man.